So I'm really excited to be here. I'm doing at the request of some friends of mine, I've decided to start doing a vlog. And the point of this vlog will be to really focus on kind of my conceptual way of teaching and my friends' conceptual way of teaching and techniques versus just kind of showing cool moves. One thing I've really wanted to do is visit friends of mine who I know are excellent teachers and kind of pick their brains and get their viewpoints on techniques, issues of the day in jiu-jitsu, and their way of teaching. And I couldn't be more excited. I'm here with my buddy Seth Shamp. Seth is probably my closest brother in the jiu-jitsu world. We got our black belts together, and I honestly probably got my black belt because of all the help he gave me preparing. We helped each other out really big time preparing for this. And so I definitely wanted to make him the first person that I visited for this. And so thanks a ton, Seth. So one thing we're going to start, and this is the first one, so obviously hopefully as we go further we'll get a better feel of it, but we just want to kind of pick Seth's brain, almost like a little semi-private class. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to start, and we're just going to keep a very kind of cliche question, but it's a good one to ask. So what got you started with jiu-jitsu? That's a question a lot of people wonder about with anybody. What starts you in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah. I'm from a little bit of an older generation than the modern day jiu-jitsu climate, but what got me started was watching Royce Gracie. Right. That's like most people from back in the day. We watched this Brazilian kid go into a cage under the pretenses of no rules, anything goes, and a spectacle ensued. And what we got to watch was a brutal display of fighting, but then there was this technical aspect that we all kind of gravitated towards, which was what Royce was doing, which seemed magical to most of us, and we didn't really understand it. But after that first UFC, I was hooked. I said, what is that? I want to learn what that is. I want to see what he did. At the time, 1995 or so, there wasn't any jiu-jitsu really in my area. There wasn't a lot of options. So I, like a lot of people at that time, reached out for whatever resources we could find, which were the Gracie in Action tapes. Right. And I got those, and I was living in Pennsylvania at the time with a friend, and he and I were watching those tapes, which had some instructionals on them, and we were watching the UFCs, and we were practicing what we saw, and that's what we were going for. And that was basically how I started. From there, I had this relationship with jiu-jitsu, that I knew what jiu-jitsu was. I loved jiu-jitsu. I had no idea the intricacies of all of it. I just sort of had this cursory glance of it, and I knew that if I was ever going to really get into the martial arts, jiu-jitsu would be the one I did. Fast forward a few years, and I finally found an academy in upstate New York that I was able to legitimize my training under the supervision of a brown belt who was able to kind of fill in all the gaps and get me going down the right road.
Nice. And so, and then you got down here, and then of course you got your black belt under Royce Gracie, which this may sound kind of, I don't know, elitist. It's not meant this way, but being somebody who is this closely connected to the source, 2 steps away from Grandmaster Helio and Carlos, how do you think that changes the way you view the art, you practice the art versus, again, somebody who's maybe, further steps along, removed, doesn't have somebody that's, Royce's son, Helio's son saying, hey, this is how he thought the art should be practiced?
I think for me, it's almost surreal that it actually takes critical thinking for me to get to that spot. It's almost surreal that this mythical figure from the mid-90s that was doing what he did, and sort of this iconic figure that in my mind at the time was the baddest dude on the planet. This was by far and away the toughest guy. And growing up as a little kid, I was enamored by martial arts movies and watching that stuff and saving the day and kind of stuff. So in my head there's this backstory of being able to defend or fight or whatever it might be. And so Royce was this iconic figure. And so for me to sort of, sometimes I do have to pinch myself or take a step back and say, I am a Royce Gracie Black Belt. I am under this person that 20 years ago was a mythical icon in my mind, but now I represent his jiu-jitsu. So I do have to, I probably don't as much as I should, or maybe not should, but I don't as much as you might think, revel or sort of dwell on that, right. That he is my instructor, that I am under him. But when I do, when I maybe use critical thinking or put myself in that mindset, I do feel a sense of responsibility to maintain a connection to the roots of what him and his father and his uncle were really trying to do with jiu-jitsu when they were able to get what Mitsuya Maeda taught them, which was find a martial art, improvise, evolve it to the point where it's something anybody can do, everyone can do, to give themselves a chance to survive with being attacked.
Good. So, from that perspective, then, there seems to be, especially with the popularity of the sport of jiu-jitsu, the competition aspect, and then the sort of resurgence of the self-defense mindset. There's, some people call it a split. I don't know that it's quite a split. I think it's just a spectrum, right? But what do you think is something that maybe a lot of schools these days that are more focused on the sport of the competition are lacking? And conversely, what do you think that somebody who's just doing it as a self-defense art might be able to, take away from competing?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I think people who are in the sport world, as long as they're owning that, hey, we're doing a great sport and we're having a lot of fun, good for them. Right. I love the sport of jiu-jitsu. I compete, you compete, a lot of us compete. It's a great sport to play. Love the sport of basketball, love the sport of ping pong. I love sports. So I think it's fine for there to be a spectrum, like you said, to say, I do jiu-jitsu for this, I do jiu-jitsu for this, I do jiu-jitsu mainly for these ideas and reasons. But I do think there's crossover. I think there's crossover in understanding what the sport guys could take from the self-defense guys is understanding distance. Right. Management is completely different in those two. Right. Whether or not I'm trying to play in the guard, whether or not I'm trying to escape side control, whether or not I'm on the feet trying to engage, the distance changes completely. Distance management concepts completely change. Side control, I want to keep you close to me. Right. In a self-defense situation. In a sports situation, I want to get away from you and make space. Right. And so what I think sport guys can use is sort of that understanding of there's a shift in distance management and mindset, and that though you are going to be a monster on the mat and on the ground, if you take this person to the ground and get into the spots that you're comfortable with, just your sport training alone is not enough to be able to always deal with some of the craziness that exists in the world. So I think the sport guys could really benefit from the distance management aspects of our self-defense aspects of jiu-jitsu. Conversely, if you're only doing self-defense training, if your mindset is only focused on this is what I would do in the street, this is what I would do when I'm attacked, then you're not actually going to give yourself as much opportunity as in the sport world to feel the heat, right? To feel the pressure of sparring, of rolling, of getting out there and even competing. Right. There is something pretty jarring about locking up with someone that you don't know who wants to choke you. Right. And that first feeling of the intensity when they grab you and they hold you and they're trying to pin you, and
completely hard.
It's super hard, and you don't know them.
Right.
So there's an absolute emotional response that goes into it. We get so tired in competition early on when you're a white belt and just starting to compete. You get so tired early on. In my opinion, a lot because of the fear that is existing in that moment, the emotional response that you don't have a lot of control over. I could roll with Kevin for 30 minutes and not get that tired, but I could roll for 30 seconds with someone I don't know, another black belt, and be smoked because I don't know him and he wants to hurt me. Yeah, and that's a benefit.
Yeah, we've talked about that when you and I have competed together. We're in the bullpen or whatever, the Pans or the New York Open or whatever, about just the anxiety, right? That we hate it, but it's something that you have to go through. In the same way that a fight would happen. Yeah. The anxiety, that's not something you can fake on the mat.
No, the anxiety is something you conquer.
Right.
And if I'm pumping gas and some guy's in my face and you get that little feeling in your stomach like this is about to go from bad to worse, that's an anxiety. That's a response that you can say, all right, I've been here before. Right. I know that I'm trusting in my techniques. I'm not going to freeze. I'm not going to fold. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to be in the moment and ready for that heightened sense of anxiety and fight. Right. And that's as close as you can get in a jiu-jitsu tournament or in an MMA fight, in a competition, I believe.
You guys have something, any questions for him?
Yeah. So you said that when you started, there wasn't a lot of schools around. So now there's a lot more. So someone who's just starting out, what kind of qualities should they look for in a school or an instructor?
That's a great question. One of the things that I usually recommend to people when they're first starting out is to try different schools, is to get a flavor and a taste of it. Because the reality is certain instructors you're going to jive better with certain instructors. Certain schools have a different vibe that might be more for you. I think I stopped shy of talking too much about the instructor's abilities, because I think the abilities are secondary to his ability to convey information, right? If he's a legit black belt and there's a legit lineage there, then that's unquestionable, right? Our lineage in jiu-jitsu is so tight and it's such a small world that we can know for sure who's legit pretty quick. But what I would look for if I was entering into a school, I would look to see how he treats his students, how he talks to his students, how he runs the class, and certainly talking to other students on the mat. You know, in my academy, I know that my students are very good at embracing new people and making them feel welcome. And if you walk onto a mat and nobody talks to you, nobody says hi to you, nobody tries to make you feel a part of this team, you know, there's probably something culturally there that is indicative of maybe the way the school is in general. And vice versa, you walk on the mat and this person's just greeting you and the instructor's kind to you, and you're probably in a safer environment where your training can be more about getting better and not just about surviving. This day and age, and every day and age probably, for the jiu-jitsu, I guess since it's been around the last 23, 25 years in the States, there's been a lot of sink or swim gyms. There's a lot of sink or swim gyms where it's like you walk in there and if you can hang, then you can be a part of it and we'll embrace you. You know, we don't do that at my academy. I know that doesn't exist at Roy's Academy. But if you walk into a place where it's kind of cold and it feels a little sterile and everyone's kind of eyeballing you, you might wonder exactly what this place is going to be like and how conducive is it going to be to your goals. So knowing what you want as you walk in and then getting that vibe reciprocated to you by the students and the instructor.
And that kind of segues into something I actually want to talk about. Something recently, you know, that video that came out with Hicks and Gracie talking about loyalty, right? You know, of course, we also have the 753, and one of which is the loyalty. And the funny part about the video was it got all this reaction from people, you know, sort of negative reaction from people. And all he said was, it's fine to train at other places, but you really need one school, one instructor. And to me, it's baffling that is kind of, you know, controversial. You know, I know personally, I think it comes a little bit from sort of the consumerism mindset we have, right? I'm paying for it. I should be able to go wherever I want, buy whatever I want. If I want to train with you for a week and you for a week and you for a week. My only problem with that has been that I feel it makes schizophrenic students, right? Because of, like, I can't speak highly enough. I said about Seth. I come to him. I consider him my instructor. I come to him for information. The reason I have him here is he's one of the most technical instructors, as well as just a beast on the mat that there is, that I know. But he also shares a mindset with me. Right? I know that if I'm telling students, like, this is the way I want you to think about jiu-jitsu, he's not going to tell them something completely different. I don't have to say, all right, look, you know, we got to always be aware of punches, and you're going, no, forget about punches. It's not a matter. Or, you know, pull guard when I'm telling somebody it's more important to be on top, and you're saying, no, it's better to get half guard bottom. You know, where it's just completely different mindsets. And not that we have to have the same jiu-jitsu. You know, we differ on many things, but the general mindset is still the same, and that's where I believe the loyalty comes in. But maybe you could speak to that kind of concept of how it seems like loyalty and even Kranchi really isn't a bad word anymore.
Right. It's tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky because I don't want to create a culture in my school where it is do as I say.
Right.
I am the end all be all. Right. I don't want that. There's a lot of what I do on the mat, off the mat, to create a sort of feeling of freedom for my students. I encourage them to try other schools. I encourage them when they're investigating and trying a couple classes with me for free, you know, in that beginning stages, to also try at this school and also try at that school. I don't lock people into contracts. You know, I like people to pay month to month so that they have the freedom if they're not feeling it or whatever's going on in their life. I want you on the mat because you want to be here. And I think that generally translates into the culture of the gym, which just means we're all here because we want to be here.
Right.
We're not here because we're locked into something. We're not in here because we can't train over there. We're not here because Seth said we have to be here. We're here because we want to be here. We believe in the jiu-jitsu that I'm giving them and that the training partners are helping them get better at. And I do think that there is sometimes, I know for a fact outside of our community, that there is a feeling of if you train here, you better not go train there.
Right.
You can't train at that school. That's not our school. And it might come from insecurities.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to speak too much on that. I can say that I don't have those insecurities about my students training at other gyms. My students go and train at other schools a lot. And even if they go to a school that doesn't necessarily think the same way that I do, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it because they're tasting something different. They're getting a different feel, a different take. And at the end of the day, if truly what they got there is more attractive to them, why do I want them?
Right.
You know, I want what's best for them, and that's their journey, and that's their jiu-jitsu. I don't want them here if they would rather be there.
Right.
So, you know, my philosophy is this is what I'm doing, and I would love for you to be a part of it. And if you want to be a part of it, come be a part of it.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, I think sometimes people think when I talk about loyalty, I've lost very few students. I have students that I have a good culture and they want to stay with me. And I do encourage them to come train with. I've sent people up here to train. I've sent people to Mark Kukros. I've sent people to Pendergrass. And it is a little bit of a special situation. We talked about this at the beginning of class, where North Carolina is always surprises people who come here from other places, especially places like California or New York, where it is very cutthroat. You know, you're Nova and Yao, and you're Alliance, and you're Gracie Baja. We can't even talk to each other. We cross-train all the time because, I mean, the twins and us and other people all kind of came up together, where it was more almost North Carolina Jiu-Jitsu versus Gustavo Machado, you know, Pedro Sauer boys. So I do like that. I just do believe that, you know, I see some people now that they couldn't even tell you what gym they're actually
Yeah, there's
at.
a level of loyalty, and like loyalty is defined for different people different
Right,
ways.
right.
You know, for one instructor, loyalty might mean don't go anywhere else.
Right, yes.
You know, and that's not what loyalty means to me. Loyalty means to me is that, like, you know, you're here because you want to be here, and you're willing to be upfront and honest and be culturally part of what I'm doing. If you know, the most loyal thing someone could do to me is if they're not happy here, they would leave.
Yeah.
That is the most loyal thing someone could do. Rather than be unhappy here and spread unhappiness around my gym,
Right.
you know, it'd be a cancer or one bad apple spoiling the bunch. The most loyal thing someone could do is to not be here if they don't want to be here. And so loyalty means different things to different people. You know, I don't have too much of the sport jiu-jitsu like kind of gym hopping,
Right.
where I'm gonna get this from them and I'm gonna get this from them, and I played it out at Marcellus, and now I'm going to the Mendez brothers, and now I'm
Right.
here, and I'm gonna go to
Yeah.
Atos. I don't have too much of that. My champions, which I have world champions, I have Pan Am champions.
Yes.
They're homegrown,
Right.
and that they're here for life. You know,
Right,
they don't
right.
want to go anywhere else. They realize what they did here was done here,
Right.
and they haven't outgrown what they can do here.
Right. They're not thinking, I got to find some
Yeah,
place to
there's
go to the next
nobody
level.
here that's outgrown what we do here.
Right.
So that's for me what loyalty is.
Sounds great. You guys have any questions?
Sure. Has there been a period in your life where you thought about not training, and what kept you training?
Yes, and I can promise just about everybody you'll go through that time. So when I was a blue belt, I suffered a pretty big injury. Like many of us go through injuries, and you know we go through them. That's just part of this. And during that injury, life changes. Things were tough, and I was not sure whether or not I would make it back. 7 months off the mat. 7 months off the mat. No training at all. Partially because at 3 months I was in a cast and couldn't drive, so I couldn't go anywhere. And then a few months after that, I was in a traction boot. It was an ankle injury, just so everybody knows. And there was a time during that when I wasn't sure whether I was going to get back. You know, I loved jiu-jitsu, but like most of us, life gets in the way. Life is there. You know, you have kids, you have a job, you have responsibilities, and there's oftentimes we drag ourselves to the mat. Even right now, all of you guys that came to the mat tonight, you know, there's some time or another you dragged yourself to the gym because you were like pumped to train tonight. You dragged yourself there because maybe you weren't feeling super good or whatever it was. You pulled yourself to the mat. We always usually leave feeling happy and satisfied that we came. But yeah, you go through those times, and in that moment for me, it was a little over 10 years ago was actually when it was, and I wasn't sure if I was gonna get back on the mat. That 7 months off changed so much about me, my body. I was going through like it was like a whole metamorphosis. I spent my entire life walking around about 175 pounds, 180 pounds, and then all of a sudden after 7 months I was 210, 215 pounds, where it was like I didn't do anything because I couldn't do anything, and I was eating whatever I wanted, and all of a sudden there I was, and I was like, man, you know, this is a different me. I'm out of shape, I'm not as fast, I'm not as strong, and I actually can't really put my finger on what got me back to it, which maybe means it's deep. You know, maybe the claws were in me and I had no idea they were in me, but I do remember I went back. And I went back for my first class, and what I started doing was I started just sitting on the sidelines and watching, because I still had a brace on my ankle and I couldn't do anything. And I would just sit and watch, and then I'd put on my gi pants and I'd sit and watch. And then I clearly remember like it was a side control attacking class, and I was like, the instructor was very much like, no, you need to wait, no, you need to wait. And I kind of like snuck out on the mat with my gi pants and my ankle brace, and I had my foot up in the air, and I was like Kimuring, key locking from side control, and then sneaking back to the side. Just, let me try that real quick. And then it got me going again. It got me bit back into it. And so I do believe that if you're out, you're injured, coming and seeing and watching class, I encourage my students to just, even if you can't get it, just come watch class. Just sit on the side and watch it, because it keeps you engaged. But getting through those dark times is a personal journey. It's a very personal journey. And if jiu-jitsu the benefits of jiu-jitsu are strong enough for you to weigh the other reasons you're not coming and balance it into the favor of going, then you will. But again, I know lots and lots and lots of people who've left and not made it back. I hope, I still have hope that they do make it back, but it's a personal journey. Nobody should be judged for their journey.
So, kind of getting a little bit on that, sort of on that topic, but so we've trained together for quite a while, and anybody who's trained with you knows just how good you are, both as an instructor and as a competitor and as somebody to roll with. You and I have hugely fun roles. What would you say? What would you kind of define yourself just as just a grappler? How would you define your style? Because I know you're very well rounded. You got a dangerous guard. You're a great guard passer. Good submission guy.
My style. That's an interesting question. I think my style has to be rooted in the way that I teach. And the way that I teach, as all of my students will tell you, is that you are going to be successful when you take inventory of what your opponent is doing. And so my style is a sort of, I don't want to, maybe a boxer would call themselves a counterpuncher.
Right.
I would say maybe that's what I'm doing on the mat, is taking inventory of what my opponent is doing and then basing it off of that. I'm not I'm going to impose my will kind of person, that I'm going to go do this, but it feels like that to a lot of people,
right,
that I'm just not letting you do anything and I'm just going to smash you. But I'm not. I'm looking at what you did with your knee and what you did with your foot and what you did with your hand and what you did with your grip, and then I'm saying these are the things I'm allowed to do within the confines of what you're doing.
Right.
And then I really think that the cerebral approach to inventory, where am I, what's going on, and that's what I tell all my competitors, is be in the moment. Be in the moment of what's going on and see what's going on around you.
Right.
Too often we give up, we open up ourselves for submissions,
right,
we open up ourselves for sweeps, and if we're more conscientious of what this position means holistically,
right,
we have a better opportunity to conquer that. It's just like a chessboard. Some really good chess players, Dewan, if you're listening, he could sit down at a chess game that is 2/3 of the way through and immediately know what this guy should and should not do,
right,
and immediately know what that guy should and should not do,
right,
because he could take inventory of a board like that.
Right, right.
That's what I'm trying to do in my roles, is take inventory of what I should and shouldn't do, what I could and cannot do with each moment. So my style of grappling is not shutting you down within the confines of what you want to do. And I think that traces back to a lot of what I tell my students, which is the role is a dance.
Right.
It's a balance between what do you want to do to me and what do I want to do to you.
Right.
And I have to make sure I'm smart with that balance.
Right. Well, I've certainly felt that. You guys have any questions?
Yeah. So Seth, we have a larger female population than a lot of the schools around here. Does that change the way that you approach teaching at all, or does it?
Probably doesn't change the way that I teach. No, it does. I think there's an impact, because I'm a huge fan of this. I'm also biased. I have 2 daughters that I'm trying to raise in this crazy world, and so they're probably the biggest priority I have in life is making sure my daughters are safe as they grow up. So I have this other idea that I look at that, not that I look at my lady students as my daughters, but I do look at their journey and their education in jiu-jitsu similarly to my daughters, and that, okay, you guys have a little bit of a tougher road in the crazy world that we live in than men. And I'm not trying to be sexist or misogynistic with that. It's just I believe that, and as such, I want to make sure that the women who were I don't say brave, but were able to walk through that front door, which we all know is the hardest thing to do in jiu-jitsu. The ones that were able to do that want to stay, and they want to feel comfortable with this, and they want to continue training with this. Outside of what I do at my academy and outside of the other things, I have sort of this, and those who know me close know that I have I believe everybody outside of their profession, outside of their hobbies, should have something that they're trying to do to make the world a little bit better of a place. And that thing to me is trying to teach women how to defend themselves for reasons, And so when I have women that are, able to come into the gym and want to train, what most is affected is my retention of them. And I want them to feel comfortable here. And I want them to know that this is a safe place and that you're not going to get hurt and that nobody here is mean and that you're in the best place. Because that ugly duckling phase of jiu-jitsu, the counterintuitive nature of jiu-jitsu, is a turnoff for everybody. But if you're also smaller and weaker and having a harder time and there's not a lot of ladies in the class, there's other confines that might make you not want to stay. And so it doesn't necessarily change the technique that I teach that night.
So, I guess we can kind of tie it up. Speaking about your style, I was thinking maybe, again, like I said, I've always been extremely impressed with your technical knowledge. And I come up here and, you'll teach me something I thought I knew, or you'll show something I thought I knew, and I'll realize I really didn't understand it to the depth I could have.
And they say the same thing about you, just so you know. Same thing.
So is there anything that maybe you could show us, a kind of, is emblematic of kind of your style or your way of teaching, or something that maybe is, one of your sneaky techniques?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to show a technique. I mean, I think that, what I would maybe hope to reach most people with is a simple fundamental technique.
Absolutely.
And that's what the broader spectrum of jiu-jitsu that we're going to try to reach with any teaching online in this capacity, is to show something that people have heard of and know. And so if you'd like, I just want to show you the way I do an armbar from the guard.
That'd be
It's a very
great.
simple armbar from the guard. I teach it in 11 steps.
Right.
11 steps to finishing an armbar from the closed guard. Some people can do it in less steps, but this one goes to 11. So, having said that, if I can have you hop in my guard, Roy. All right. Very simply, you have to take inventory of his posture. If Roy's sitting up like this, I'm not going to armbar him. If he's all the way down here, I'm not going to armbar him. I'm going to look for the attacks on these arms when he's about here, about halfway through the middle. So first thing I'm going to do is pick a side that I want to attack, which will be his right arm. And I'm going to take my other hand, I'm going to go under the far arm, or the other arm, and trap between the elbow and the shoulder, cupping the outside of the tricep. I'm holding it, but there's absolutely a snug. I'm trying to pull that arm back to the middle of my body. My other hand's just going to, for now, rest right up here on the shoulder. These are 11 deliberate steps to the armbar, but certainly when you do them, they're going to blend together quickly. They're going to slide together. So step 1, trap the arm. Step 2, block the opposite shoulder. Step 3, same side arm you're attacking, foot goes on the hip. Step 4, I'm going to start to create that perpendicular angle that the armbar is known for. I do that not by just moving myself, but I'm going to move him as well. So I move myself about 45 degrees and I'm going to move him about 45 degrees. So step 3, foot on the hip. Step 4, push my head off about 45. Step 5, my leg comes up into his armpit and pushes him about 45 degrees. That's what gives me this angle to the side. Now from here, that arm that was on the shoulder comes into play. Step 6, I'm going to block his face. 7, leg comes around. I want to put my knee pit on his neck, and I want to make sure there's no space. Roy talks a lot about taking away space to make the finish easy. I don't want to be here. I want to be here. From there, I'm going to pinch my knees together. I'm going to pull my feet to my butt. My hands are going to slide to that wrist, and I'm going to keep the thumb pointed up, and I'm going to gently try to put my feet on the mat. If you do this quick, I'm sorry, not quick, but technically and tight, we're not going to have our feet on the mat yanking our hips up in the air. That's for when we've missed a few steps or it got a little sloppy. You do this right, we should be armbarring him with the extension of our body, not the elevation of our hips. So again, 1, trap the arm. 2, block the shoulder. 3, same side you're attacking on, foot on the hip. 4, push yourself off. 5, push him off, bite your leg. 6, stiff arm the face. 7, knee pit on the neck. 8, pinch your knees together. 9, heels to your butt. 10, slide to the wrist, keep the thumb to the ceiling. And 11, put your feet on the mat. Armbar from the guard, a simple, basic technique, but if you're drilling it, hit all of those. Hit all those details, go all the way through, and then get good at spinning for the armbar. Then get good at blending them together. But let's start really basic and then get faster as we go.
Awesome.
Armbar.
Awesome.
Cool.
You guys, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys.
Thanks. I can't thank you enough, brother.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
And, hopefully this is going to be something I'm going to continue to do. And if you are ever anywhere near the Triangle, that's Raleigh, Durham in North Carolina, you have to come by here to Triangle Jiu-Jitsu and visit Seth and get a chance to train with him. Again, I can't recommend it highly enough. And thanks again.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, guys.